66 new coronavirus infections in Victoria, pushing the state's active cases to over 440. Premier Daniel Andrews warning more suburbs could go into lockdown.
You can't rule that out because we're being driven by the data.
Other state premiers stepping up their response to ensure the surge does not cross borders. Also tonight, a leading Hong Kong pro-democracy campaigner flees the troubled territory but vows to keep up the fight. Jeffrey Epstein's ex-girlfriend charged by the US, accused of grooming underage girls. Pressure now on Prince Andrew to speak with authorities. And shoppers lured with big discounts to spend, but why businesses are being warned, slash prices as a last resort.
This is SBS World News with Anton. Enus.
Good evening. The fear that Victoria's latest coronavirus surge could further spread beyond the identified hotspots is growing tonight. State premiers have expressed their concern and have made moves to ensure the outbreak remains contained. Victoria's health minister revealing that a super spreader may be the source of a recent surge in cases. Jenny Mikakos also saying 10,000 had refused testing, sounding the alarm that some people believe the pandemic is a conspiracy or wouldn't have an effect on them. Only Victoria reported infections in the past 24 hours. Another 66 confirmed, pushing the number of active cases to over 440. 23 are reportedly in hospital. And with evidence the virus is spreading beyond the 36 suburbs under stay-at-home orders, Premier Daniel Andrews has warned more areas could be locked down.
As Victoria's strict suburban lockdown enforcement continued, the state's premier was offering his support to the more than 300,000 residents affected.
They are on the front line of this, for them and for all of us. And no one is in any doubt that it's tough.
While warning that many more Melburnians could join them.
I'm simply saying you can't rule that out because we're being driven by the data.
That latest daily data showing the COVID-19 numbers continuing to grow in those hotspots and also in suburbs outside the lockdown.
We don't like seeing 66 cases, but it is somewhat comforting that we have had a degree of stability over the last few days in terms of the overall numbers, and in particular in terms of the fact that there is huge numbers of testing occurring in all of these places.
The state has now conducted more than 880,000 tests since January, but it's been revealed that during this latest blitz in suburban hotspots, more than 10,000 people have refused to have a swab taken.
It is concerning that the report that I have received is that some people believe that coronavirus is a conspiracy or that it won't impact on them. So what I want to stress here is that coronavirus is a very contagious virus.
And much of that contagion in those suburbs has been the result of hotel confinement breaches, which are now the subject of a judicial inquiry. Under fire over claims private hotel security guards simply weren't up to the job, the Premier has rejected claims Victoria could have avoided the complete breakdown in infection control by allowing the Australian Defence Force to police hotel quarantine. Daniel Andrews saying the National Cabinet made no decision on law enforcement involvement when it agreed to implement the hotel isolation system.
It is simply wrong to say that the ADF are supporting hotel quarantine across the whole country. It's not a criticism of the ADF, but the notion that there's not a security guard working anywhere in the country doing this other than in Victoria is not accurate.
The Health Minister revealing details of just what genomic testing has shown among virus cases.
There seemed to be a single source of infection for many of the cases that have gone across the northern and western suburbs of Melbourne. There appears to be even potentially a super spreader.
We haven't yet identified lots of people who are so-called super spreaders in Australia, so we remain to see.
The government has announced help for lockdown residents finding it tough, with an extra $2 million in mental health funding. And as the virus threat heightens in Victoria, unions have called for the compulsory wearing of face masks on public transport.
It's not only going to help our members who are there working day in, day out, but it will also create a safer environment for the general public.
While Woolworths has announced it will have nurses stationed at supermarkets in the lockdown suburbs.
And joining us now from Melbourne is SBS reporter Gareth Boreham. Gareth, we understand the situation now concerning even the AFL.
Yes, good evening, Anton. AFL heavyweights Collingwood and Essendon shortly due to take the field before empty stands here at the MCG, which of course has been the home of Australian football for more than a century. But the famous ground won't be for the next month at least, once this weekend's round of football is completed, with all 10 Victorian clubs moving into interstate quarantine hubs, 6 of them in Queensland. Now, the chilly conditions here tonight might make a move to the Sunshine State quite appealing, but it's not the weather that's driving these clubs north. With Victoria's COVID-19 numbers, the AFL was simply running out of options, with other states imposing strict quarantine measures not only on Victorian clubs but also other clubs who had played Victorian teams. So just to give you an idea of how strange this fixture has become, next week we'll see one of Melbourne's biggest clubs, Richmond, the reigning premiers, taking on the Sydney Swans at the Gabba in Brisbane. So, Anton, that I guess tells it in one. That is season 2020.
That is the latest from Melbourne from a rugged-up reporter, Gareth Boreham. And a national effort is underway to help Victoria manage its surging cases of coronavirus before it spreads again to other states. Truck drivers crossing the Queensland border will be randomly checked to ensure they aren't hiding Victorians, while South Australia, New South Wales and the ACT have also stepped up measures to strengthen their borders.
A suburban street in inner West Sydney crammed with cars. Long queues at a COVID-19 testing clinic sparked by a warning from authorities that a Woolworths staff member who returned from hotel quarantine in Victoria worked while still infectious.
People in Balmain and surrounding suburbs are feeling anxious and concerned. The important thing is that anyone who notices any symptoms goes and gets a test. 50
co-workers remain in isolation. For the first time in almost a month, there were no new cases in New South Wales, but the state remains on high alert with another traveller from a hotspot arriving in Sydney by train. And this school on the Central Coast was forced to close as officials investigate whether an 18-year-old student has the virus.
That result on that young man came back with a equivocal result.
In Queensland, anyone who arrives from Victoria must now spend 14 days in hotel quarantine at their own expense. Authorities ramping up border patrols amid fears freight trucks could smuggle people in.
If you are thinking about doing it, don't do it. You will be hit with a fine. Trucks will also be randomly stopped.
We've already had people try and test the system all the way through.
From midday, restrictions were further eased in the Sunshine State and the Premier was among the first to celebrate. Most venues will be capped only by the 1 person per 4 square metre rule, and up to 100 people are allowed at home gatherings, funerals and weddings.
It's not every day as Health Minister you get to tell Queenslanders that it's a good day to go out and get on the beers, but today is a good day to go out, spend some money at your local pub.
The changes coming just in time for the school holidays.
Oh, it feels much better. Yeah, they can get out rather than stuck in the house all day.
Now that the restrictions have lifted, I can finally go out and do a lot more stuff.
In South Australia, police ordered 2 travellers from Victoria to turn around after they twice tried to cross the border. And as that state continues to grapple with its hotel quarantine operations, South Australian authorities say testing among its returned travellers is mandatory.
It is not an optional arrangement in South Australia. It is compulsory and we have 100% compliance.
Several international flights are expected to land in South Australia in the coming days. Cassandra Bain, SBS World News.
Don Harwin will be reinstated as New South Wales Minister for the Arts and Aboriginal Affairs after his fine for allegedly breaching COVID-19 restrictions was dismissed in court. Mr Harwin stood down amid claims he travelled between Sydney and his holiday home when travel to regional New South Wales was restricted. The New South Wales Police Commissioner today said he stands by his decision to issue the fine and the fact public prosecutors chose not to pursue it is a matter for them. Mr. Howen argued he relocated before the stay-at-home order was made and had been mostly living at his holiday home. US President Donald Trump says he's putting out the flames of the coronavirus, choosing to highlight promising job figures after the climbing number of COVID-19 infections. In the past 24 hours, more than 55,000 new infections were reported across the country, about a fifth of those in Florida alone. And with the 4th of July holiday days away, authorities are pleading with residents to not make the situation worse.
President Trump says his job figures would make other presidents jealous.
Today's announcement proves that our economy is roaring back. It's coming back extremely strong.
Nearly 5 million jobs were created in June and unemployment fell to 11.1% from a peak of 14.7% in April. But critics say the June figures don't tell the whole story and COVID-19 hotspots are threatening to engulf the economy.
We have some areas where we're putting out the flames or the fires, and that's working out well.
His political rival Joe Biden says those flames are burning out of control.
We're still down nearly 15 million jobs, and the pandemic is getting worse, not better.
Biden quick to point out 19 states are rolling back or pausing plans to reopen.
The crisis is being handled.
But some workers in this unemployment queue have lost their job for a second time.
I got furloughed with almost no notice from my job. This second round, I think, is going to be more stressful.
Stress is increasing on the healthcare system as daily infections are double what they were a month ago. Florida, the worst hit with 10,000 new infections overnight and the state's youngest death, an 11-year-old boy. The mayor of Miami Beach says if hospitals reach capacity, the city may have to return to a full lockdown. The nation's lead infectious disease experts offering a sober assessment.
Right now, if you look at the number of cases, it's quite disturbing. And we're setting records practically every day of new cases. That clearly is not the right direction.
At Texas hospitals, there's a wait list for ventilators.
They're so sick that if they don't get put on, they don't get that support, they're probably going to die. I had 3 beds.
The Texas governor backflipping on masks, now making them compulsory statewide. Beach parties will be off limits with California and Florida reinforcing the closures, all leading into the 4th of July long weekend. Lucy Murray, SBS World News.
Pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong say Beijing's new national security laws mean they can be arrested for speaking out in public or for holding a poster on the street. Some activists have already fled Hong Kong and say they'll continue to fight for the colony's freedom from abroad.
He's been front and centre of pro-democracy protests for years. But now 26-year-old activist Nathan Law has fled his Hong Kong home. Fearing arrest, he won't say where he is, but is vowing to keep fighting.
There is certain tenacity inside Hong Kong democratic movement, regardless of how large the suppression is.
The former student leader was jailed for his involvement in the 2014 umbrella movement and says China pays no respect to human rights and President Xi must stand down.
It's time for a leader for the country who knows how to treat its people good.
Simon Cheng is another pro-democracy campaigner who also fled Hong Kong, claiming he was beaten by China's secret police. He's leading the charge from London to create an unofficial parliament in exile to support the pro-democracy movement.
We wanted to set up the non-official civic groups that truly reflects the voice of Hong Kong people.
The national security law was drafted in record time in Beijing. Hong Kong's legal experts, who'd usually be involved in writing the law, saw the text for the first time after it was enacted. Some, like Legislative Councillor Tanya Chan, are worried it could be open to interpretation by police and prosecutors.
National security covers a very wide range of activities, including something related to economy, religion, education, and media, internet.
27 countries have now expressed concern over the controversial law, but Beijing remains defiant and says justice will prevail.
And a few Western countries' attempts to smear China will never succeed.
The UK has offered residency and possible citizenship to up to 3 million people from Hong Kong. Australia is also considering offering safe haven. Felicity Davey, SBS World News.
The gunman in the Christchurch mosque attack will learn his fate next month, with his sentencing to begin on the 24th of August. The Australian man has pleaded guilty to all 51 counts of murder in the 2019 terror attack. His sentencing had been delayed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The trial over the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi has begun in Turkey, with the case against 20 Saudi Arabian nationals being heard in absentia. The Washington Post columnist was last seen entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018 to get paperwork for his upcoming wedding. His remains have never been found. In March, Turkish prosecutors indicted 20 suspects over the killing, including 2 former senior aides to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The former girlfriend and associate of billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein faces up to 35 years in jail after she was arrested and charged by the FBI. Ghislaine Maxwell faced a US court this morning, charged with helping Epstein procure underage sex partners.
Ghislaine Maxwell had been laying low. But according to prosecutors, she was still living in luxury, arrested at a secluded property in the US state of New Hampshire, a property she bought with cash. Almost a year to the day, her friend Jeffrey Epstein was arrested and charged with sex trafficking.
We've been discreetly keeping tabs on Maxwell's whereabouts as we work this investigation, and more recently we learned she had slithered away to a gorgeous property in New Hampshire, continuing to live a life of privilege while her victims live with the trauma inflicted upon them years ago.
Epstein took his life in jail last August. His victims feared they'd never see justice, but Maxwell's arrest brings new hope.
Maxwell was among Epstein's closest associates and helped him exploit girls who were as young as 14 years old.
The indictment alleges between 1994 and 1997, Maxwell assisted, facilitated and contributed to Jeffrey Epstein's abuse of minor girls by helping Epstein to recruit, groom and ultimately abuse victims known to be under the age of 18. One of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Giuffre, in that now infamous photo from 2001 with Maxwell and Prince Andrew, today tweeting, "Hope the judge throws the book at her. So happy."
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady.
Prince Andrew has not been accused of any wrongdoing, but he's been criticised by the FBI for not cooperating with their investigation. His lawyers reject that, saying they've offered to help 3 times, but prosecutors today repeated their call for him to provide a statement.
I will say that we would welcome Prince Andrew coming in to talk with us. We would like to have the benefit of his statement.
After that now famous Newsnight interview last year, Prince Andrew has stepped away from royal duties. Rachel Carey, SBS World News.
And pressure is mounting on the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, to speak with US authorities. Let's go now to Europe correspondent Ben Lewis, who joins us live from London. Ben, what, if anything, has the Prince had to say?
Anton, good evening. Nothing from Prince Andrew or from his legal team officially, but a source close to the Duke has been briefing various British media, saying the Duke's team is bewildered by the Department of Justice's comments earlier today, as we have twice reached out to them in the last month and have received no reply. So for now, it appears this stalemate between New York prosecutors and the Duke is set to continue. But as you said, Anton, pressure is increasing on Prince Andrew to to agree to an interview. We can have a look at the front page of today's Sun newspaper. It reads, "Bet you're sweating now, Andy." Anton, no surprise, Buckingham Palace choosing not to make a statement saying that because Prince Andrew is no longer a working royal, this is a matter for his private legal team.
That is Ben Lewis with the latest on that evolving story from London. Coming up next, a major blow to organised crime in Europe as police make over 800 arrests. New goals to improve outcomes for Indigenous Australians. And hairdryers and apartments up for grabs. How the Kremlin sought to boost voter turnout in Russia's constitutional referendum.
Tonight at 7:30, 20th Century America was filled with high-profile people with cool names like Rockefellers, Vanderbilts, Roosevelts, Kennedys. Uncover the stories behind the names in a double episode of America in Colour, then 24 Hours in Emergency.
Join me, Rove McManus, for Australia's first ever televised life drawing class with nude models, amateur artists and a bunch of special guests. Watch or draw along from home. It doesn't matter if you're a passionate Picasso or a stick figure specialist. All you need is pencil, paper and a little artistic licence. It's a masterpiece.
Life Drawing live tomorrow 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
I drive a lot. I build stuff, pull things, push things, and I hit things. And then I carry stuff.
What do you do again?
I drive a Hilux.
Australia's #1 selling vehicle, 4 years running. Oh, what a feeling. Toyota.
At GIO, we know that when it comes to insurance, everyone loves to save. And now you can receive 12 months free roadside assistance when you take out a new GIO comprehensive car insurance policy. Oh dear, well, that's not good. Ah, that's better. 12 months free roadside assistance. It's just one of the many ways you can save with GIO. Call 13 10 10 today. You know with GIO.
Roger! Jump up! Do it for a schmackos! Rogie!
This is how legends are made. Lightning inside me. Or just you watch. This is how legends are made. Like a tiger that's rising.
The legendary Toyota Supra is back. Experience the exhilaration for yourself.
This is how legends are made.
Oh, what a feeling. Toyota.
After a huge week of activism, what comes next?
People are marching because they've seen the images.
You need to come together.
For the child who is working for nothing, it's slavery.
And you invented it. You, the white people, invented it.
This is our generation. It's a new generation.
Everybody's fight was worth it.
She wasn't there because she'd done anything wrong.
Tuesday on Where Are You Really From? The Serbian story of a steel city.
We are about over 10,000 Serbian people all over.
We didn't watch a movie, we had a war.
Where Are You Really From? Tuesday on SBS and on demand.
Police in Europe have penetrated an encrypted communications network used by criminals trading in drugs and guns in an operation investigators liken to cracking the Enigma code. More than 800 suspects have been arrested across the continent, while British detectives disrupted a murder plot thanks to the intercepted messages.
For weeks, police across Europe have been rounding up suspects. Identified thanks to a groundbreaking operation that allowed authorities to monitor the messages of criminals across the continent.
When this was cracked, my team described this as the equivalent to the cracking of the Enigma code. They liken it to having an inside person in every serious and organised crime group across the UK, where we are in there watching everything that they're doing.
In 2017, French security services began investigating an encrypted phone network called EncroChat. It ran on customised Android handsets with GPS and camera functions physically removed. Users would pay thousands of euros a year for the device and were promised totally private messaging. But earlier this year, French and Dutch authorities infiltrated the network. As the arrests began, rumours swirled among users that EncroChat had been compromised by law enforcement. The police are having a field day, read one message. This year, the police are winning, read another. In Britain alone, 2 tons of cocaine has been found, several dozen guns recovered, and around 97 million Australian dollars worth of suspect cash has been seized. Detectives even used the messages to disrupt a murder plot involving 2 gangs. British police chiefs describe the operation as a game changer. Only some of the intercepted messages have been acted upon. Many more will be used in future prosecutions. Among those targeted, the so-called Mr. and Mrs. Biggs of London's underworld.
This is their total way of life, and some of them will appear very respectable. This will be a surprise to their neighbours. But they are top-end organised criminals whose work, if you like, whose impact plays out on the streets of London.
Precisely how EncroChat was infiltrated has not been explained, and those arrested might challenge the methods used when their cases come to trial. In London, Ben Lewis, SBS World News.
Well, returning now to unfolding unrest in Hong Kong, and as we heard earlier, a prominent activist has fled the territory. For more on the situation, let's go to CNN correspondent Ivan Watson. Ivan, good evening to you. What has been the response on the ground when a figure like Nathan Law chooses to flee?
Well, it's part of the chill that has set over this city since the law came into effect on the eve of July 1st. It's been 3 days now. We have seen people arrested for carrying flags that are deemed to be separatist. We've seen the Hong Kong administration issue a warning that if you repeat a chant that protesters often chanted throughout the months of increasingly violent protests last year, it is liberate Hong Kong, the revolution of our times, a warning that can be deemed as separatist and thus illegal according to this new law. And there have been arrests of at least 10 people thus far directly charged with breaking this national security law, in addition to more than 360 others who were arrested who tried to demonstrate against the law on Wednesday. A number of opposition parties have announced that they've closed their offices here in Hong Kong. Meanwhile, I've had direct interviews with senior officials in the Hong Kong administration. They insist that the freedoms that are articulated in Hong Kong's mini constitution will continue to be respected: freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and so on. But they say that if you cross a line, and this is what nobody seems to know right now, where exactly is that line and who will ultimately determine where that line is? If you cross a line into acts that can be deemed as separatist or subversive or terrorist or colluding with a foreign power, then you can have the wrath of God brought against you and face up to life in prison.
That is the latest from CNN correspondent Ivan Watson on a tense situation in Hong Kong. A new national agreement signed off today will give Indigenous groups more say in setting and achieving closing the gap targets. 16 new goals will replace a decades-old strategy which hasn't delivered enough change to Indigenous disadvantage.
Entering a new era of Indigenous policy, the Minister and community leaders at the same table for the first time. After 18 months of negotiations, they've come together to forge a new way forward in closing the gap between First Australians and the wider population. An agreement that represents more than just words.
They represent an opportunity to make a real difference to the lives of our people.
Yes, the targets are ambitious, but for the first time accountability is shared between all parties. Endorsing the new agreement is just the beginning.
16 new targets for health, education and jobs have been set, along with 4 priority reforms to ensure they'll be Indigenous-led and embrace the concerns of 4,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander responses. One new target will aim to lower the high rates of Indigenous incarceration, which has more than doubled in the past few decades.
Laws like defaulting on fines or public drunkenness, which see people sent to prison who should never have been there at all. These laws could all be changed overnight and would make a massive difference to the disparity between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people.
Earlier today, Ken Wyatt abandoned a leaked draft proposal for incarceration rates to reach parity by 2093, saying targets set more than 70 years away will not deliver any change.
Those parity pushes are not supported by the Commonwealth nor by ministers.
It follows years of debate about the lack of ambition in some targets and the low rates of achievement since the Closing the Gap strategy began 12 years ago. While the federal government is expected to come to the table with extra funding, Labor still holds concerns.
It would be almost impossible to imagine that there is going to be huge improvements unless there is a big investment.
The targets will go to National Cabinet next week. Nikari Thorpe, SBS World News.
In an overwhelming result, Russian voters have backed wide-changing constitutional reforms that are set to have far-reaching impact on the country's geopolitics. More than 200 amendments have been endorsed, but the most consequential is that President Vladimir Putin could remain in power for another 16 years. The former KGB officer has already shown his political longevity, having held either the prime ministership or presidency since 1999. On the world stage, Mr. Putin has been a divisive figure and recently been linked to election meddling. But it's at home where a growing economy and improving standard of living have ensured he has enjoyed high domestic approval. But how much support does he really have?
Russia's amended constitution appeared in bookshops before the vote was even over, the clearest indication of the inevitability of the result. Voters were reached in hospital and wherever they could be found. The COVID pandemic, no obstacle, with local officials told they could be sacked if turnout was not high enough. And so it was. This polling station in Vladivostok operated from the back of a car. Independent observers were barred from observing, which is just as well for the Kremlin, given that even a shopping trolley was deployed to deliver to Vladimir Putin the endorsement he wants. Russia's president made a last-minute appeal for votes in front of a war memorial to the Soviet dead. A pledge never to forget their sacrifice is among the constitutional changes, as is a ban on same-sex marriage and a promise never to give up the Crimea, which Putin seized in 2014. The fact that the former KGB colonel will be allowed to run for office until 2036 is almost buried in the small print.
This is what provides for the refining of our political system and the securing of social guarantees. This is what preserves our sovereignty, territorial integrity, our spiritual, historical and moral values that bring generations together.
Mr. Putin has been in charge for 20 years. A viral online meme shows him still in charge at the age of 83. And so we'd better get used to more Russian aircraft probing NATO airspace. While the same branch of military intelligence accused of poisoning 2 Russians and killing Dawn Sturgis in Salisbury in 2018 is now accused of paying bounties for American and British soldiers killed in Afghanistan. So it's hardly surprising that American lawmakers have joined the UK in opposing Donald Trump's invitation for Vladimir Putin to rejoin September's G7 summit.
Number one, the President of the United States should not be inviting Russia into the G7 or G8. We should be considering what sanctions are appropriate to further deter Russia's malign activities.
There were winners from Russia's plebiscite. This man won a hairdryer in a nationwide raffle for voters. while this woman won an apartment. The fact that she's head of a local election commission is, she says, a coincidence. But the result itself was not left to chance. This is a man who has now gained the stamp of approval for a decision he'd already taken to stay in power. And the longer he does, the more likely it is that Russia and the West will grow further apart.
The Australian Federal Police have charged a man who allegedly sent spam emails to voters in the seat of Eden Monaro in an effort to discredit Labor's candidate Kristy McBain. Ms McBain says she's worried it will impact the final results as voters head to the polls in the New South Wales electorate tomorrow.
As the campaign to win votes draws to an end...
How you going? How are you?
Do you have any questions you'd like to ask me?
The Australian Federal Police end another campaign allegedly designed to influence the result, charging a 32-year-old Sydney man for sending menacing and offensive emails about Labor candidate Kristy McBain.
Yeah, it's obviously concerning that it potentially has an impact on the outcome of tomorrow.
The man accused of spreading disinformation through spam emails appearing to be from the Catholic Church.
It's good that he's been caught and charged. This is an interference in our democratic process.
Liberal candidate Fiona Cotvoy is on the hustings in the electorate's largest centre, Queanbeyan.
I'm feeling really good, still full of energy, and it's been a great campaign, but it's going to be a really close result.
After the New South Wales Deputy Premier John Barilaro failed to deny preferencing the former Labor MP ahead of his coalition partner. The Nationals candidate appeared to forget his own party's advice.
Well, I'm out here with Labor as our first preference, so Labor as we're fully behind Fiona.
Some voters a little more certain.
I voted for the Labor Party. I voted for Fiona for the Liberal Party.
Others not so much.
Yeah, just going to make up my mind when I get in there. I guess I've lost a bit of faith in all the parties, really.
While this by-election has been fought on local issues, the ramifications will be much broader. It's the first electoral test for opposition leader Anthony Albanese. And opposition hasn't lost a by-election to a sitting government in a century. Mr Albanese dismissing suggestions his leadership is under threat if he becomes the first.
I love campaigning. I look forward to the next federal campaign.
In what will be a tight contest, preferences from the smaller parties could decide who wins.
And we're directing people away from the coalition government because they've done the wrong thing.
And who loses. In Merimbula on the New South Wales South Coast, Pablo Vinales, SBS World News.
Thousands of bank employees have been underpaid some of their entitlements. SBS finance editor Ricardo Gonçalves joins us in the studio with more. Ricardo, it's being rectified.
Anton, around 8 million who were underpaid their long service leave. In a statement, the bank says the errors were identified as part of a review which found staff had been both underpaid and overpaid leave entitlements. Workers who have been overpaid will not be asked to repay any money. Shoppers are returning in droves, with consumers spending $29 billion in May. That's up 17% compared to April, when sales posted a record fall. And it was the clothing and footwear sector which did much of the heavy lifting, with turnover up 129%, while department store sales rose more than 40%. But after restrictions forced thousands of stores to close for weeks, many have discounted items to re-engage customers.
It's a message seen across one of Australia's most famous shopping strips. This boutique store on Oxford Street, among those to hold unprecedented sales amidst the coronavirus pandemic.
It is completely rare for us, so we haven't actually done that before, so we haven't forfeited our margins like that.
A number of luxury items have been reduced by as much as 40%.
It wasn't about us, it wasn't about purchasing things from us, it wasn't about generating a profit for us, it was just about helping people through these times.
Other retailers have chosen not to discount their stock.
Instead, we chose to take a more costly option. We increased our sampling program,
fearing they'll set a new expectation for customers.
It shifts the way they value the product. And having said that, I believe in providing my customer value
One expert believes discounting should be a last resort for businesses.
You attract customers who you may not attract, and you'd go, well, that's a great thing. But what happens is those people are like seagulls. They flutter around looking for the latest chip or the latest scrap of whatever.
Today's retail trade figures showed a resurgence in clothing and footwear sales through May as retailers reopen their doors. It also falls in line with the launch of the government's early access to super scheme.
Since about April 20, people have accessed about $12.5 billion by about the end of May in their superannuation, and they've had that to spend.
And there are concerns that boost will be short-lived.
We do think that this is truly a sugar hit that won't be sustainable because we've seen consumers come back shopping in May after being in lockdown through April and retailers being closed. So what we're concerned about, of course, is actually what does the retail industry look like post-JobKeeper ending.
At this stage, that's scheduled for September. The government will outline the future of JobKeeper later this month. Adrian Archuli, SBS World News.
Despite today's numbers, most retail stocks failed to capitalise on the positive sentiment. The likes of Myak, Mandu and JB Hi-Fi were weaker.
I think there's also the realisation that things may pull back, that the strength that we've seen as the economy sees the full hit of coronavirus and as the fiscal stimulus starts to fade away, that in fact the buoyancy that we're seeing now may actually ease off.
Still, the Australian share market managed to finish 0.4% higher today to be at a 3-week high, buoyed by those stronger than expected US job figures overnight. Health stocks did particularly well, so too the insurers. CBA was the only one of the big four banks to rise. The Australian dollar is firmer against the greenback ahead of next week's Reserve Bank board meeting and is buying a little over $1.06 New Zealand. Now, one stock which has been a quiet outperformer this week is Australia's most widely held stock and one which we've all likely got in our super funds. That's Telstra, up 4% today to be more than 7% higher since Wednesday. Analysts tell me it's because investors are chasing yield, with some switching out of the banks.
They're looking to potentially divest their infrastructure assets. That'll bring a lot of money into their balance sheet, makes the dividend a lot better and safer, and also they'll compete in the retail space a lot better. The other third one is they pay their dividends in August.
Telstra's full-year results will be out on August the 13th. And Anton, a quiet weekend on the equities front because the 4th of July falls on a Saturday, which means Wall Street will be closed tonight for a long weekend across the Pacific.
Thanks, Ricardo. Coming up next, the desperate search for survivors caught under a wall of mud and water. And a Nobel Peace Prize winner facing a test to hold a nation together.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute finance thanks to Western Union. Easy international money transfers. Tonight at 7:30, 20th Century America was filled with high-profile people with cool names like Rockefellers, Vanderbilts, Roosevelts, Kennedys. Uncover the stories behind the names in a double episode of America in Colour, then 24 Hours in Emergency.
Wednesday, 8:30.
If Fiona doesn't get the visa, she would have to leave Australia.
The fate of two families hangs on one decision.
We don't understand why he can't stay.
We hope that we are not illegal in this country.
And how can you plead your case when you can't even prove your own identity?
The department are looking for fraud.
My heart goes out to whichever poor sucker has to make that decision.
Who Gets to Stay in Australia continues Wednesday, 8:30 on SBS and On Demand.
Every day, millions of people trust Western Union to send money. With the Western Union app, you can now send money easily around the world. Send money online to a bank account for no sender or receiver transfer fees. Download the app. Western Union.
Getting a new fridge home isn't a big deal.
If you get this big deal from Binglee,
spend $700 or more on a selected fridge at Binglee and we'll deliver it, unpack it and take away your old fridge free.
New challenges, new jobs. Wherever you go in life,
Host Plus is the industry super fund that goes with you. The fund that puts members first, every day. Host Plus. Wherever life takes you, we go with you.
Australia's favourite toy sale is back. They'll be lining up for chores with big brands like Lego, Barbie and Bluey. Toy Mania ends July 15. Big W. Every day is a big day.
More than ever, it's important to keep up with the world's headlines. And as news gets better here, you can send money to your loved ones when they need it most, leaving you to get the whole story. Western Union. Easy international money transfers.
There was a time you looked at the stars and dreamed of what might be. Childish dreams, Captain. I'll show you my true nature. Our nature. Lock and lock.
Star Trek Sundays starts with the motion picture, Sunday 8:30 on SBS Viceland.
Growing up for me was caught between two worlds. It starts to make sense when I see that one name.
Oh, wow. It's the last thing I expected to find here.
Troy Casa Daily in Who Do You Think You Are? Tuesday 7:30 on SBS and on demand.
More than 160 bodies have been recovered from a collapsed mine in Myanmar, with authorities fearing the death toll will continue to rise. Hundreds of people were at the world's biggest jade mine in Kachin state when they were engulfed by mud and rock triggered by heavy rain. It's the worst incident in a series of deadly attacks, and there's increasing scrutiny on the government for failing to take action on unsafe conditions.
Sodden with rain, an entire hillside collapses into a flooded jade mine, pushing a wall of water down into the valley below. People scrambled to safety, shouting out warnings. But it was too late for many of them. They pointed out people swept up in the deluge. There's another caught in the wave, he shouts. They've all gone. Hundreds of thousands are drawn to the mines by poverty in the rest of the country and the possibility of striking it rich here. Jade can fetch prices similar to gold. The industry has long been dominated by companies with shady links. To the Myanmar military, to Chinese businesses, to drug dealers and armed insurgent groups. Scavengers of all ages sift through the waste left by the big companies, working and living under a ravaged and unstable landscape which they know can come down and bury them at any time. Once the deluge had subsided, they could start collecting the victims, a scene that's all too familiar here. Last year, 2 landslides claimed more than 70 lives. This looks like being the deadliest yet. The mines were supposed to be closed for the wet season, but rules mean little in this lawless region of Myanmar.
Throughout his career, Ethiopian singer Hachalu Hundessa emerged as a political voice calling for freedom. His killing this week has sparked unrest, with more than 80 people left dead. The question has now turned to how Prime Minister and last year's Nobel Peace Prize winner Abiy Ahmed Ali will hold the country together.
Grief and loss at the burial of one of Ethiopia's most famous singers, Hachalu Hundessa, a man who sang about peace and freedom, shot dead in Addis Ababa on Monday night. More than an entertainer, he was a symbol for the ethnic Oromo people. He sang about the political and economic suffering they endured under consecutive Ethiopian regimes. His music even played a part in the downfall of the previous government 2 years ago.
I'm heartbroken. Hachalu is not an ordinary individual. He's pure Ethiopian and pure Oromo. I'm angry. It's eating me up inside.
And as in life, his death too has been political. Hachalu's assassination has caused tensions already boiling under the surface to explode. So far, at least 80 people have been killed in 2 days of violent protest. Reports of armed groups roaming the streets, clashing with security forces. The military have been deployed to the streets of the capital and prominent Oromo politicians arrested. Anger not only in Ethiopia, his death also sparked protests across the world. Here in the UK, a crowd gathered outside the Ethiopian embassy. In South London, a small group destroyed a statue of the country's former leader Haile Selassie. Vigils for the singer held as far away as Minnesota. The death of Hachalu and the outpouring of anger that followed could become the biggest test yet for last year's Nobel Peace Prize winner, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Mr. Ahmed, Oromo himself, is losing the support of his community. The Oromo people, a majority in the country, could pose a serious threat to his leadership. Some even call for an independent Oromo state. Some fear the anger on the streets could turn into intercommunal violence and even break up the country. As the singer was laid to rest, old grievances have reawoken. His coffin won't be the last to be buried in this, Ethiopia's latest crisis.
To sport now, and as we heard earlier, all 10 Victorian-based AFL clubs will leave the state next week. Queensland's Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk confirmed her state will provide a hub for 6 teams. St Kilda and Carlton will be based at popular tourist destination Noosa, 2 hours from Brisbane, while the Western Bulldogs, Essendon, Richmond and North Melbourne will relocate to the Gold Coast.
Essentially, Queensland's going to be the home of the AFL. And, they should give us the grand final after this.
As part of this move, we'll play a total of 45 games in approximately 32 days. All Victorian clubs will then return to Victoria for a short break after that 32-day period. We'll reassess our options depending on the COVID-19 situation.
Geelong and Collingwood will join West Coast and Fremantle in Western Australia, while Hawthorn and Melbourne head north to New South Wales. Manchester City has sent Liverpool crashing back down to earth after thumping the newly crowned English Premier League champions. Kevin De Bruyne, Raheem Sterling and Phil Foden were all on target before an Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain own goal. The 4-0 defeat comes just a week after the Reds claimed their first domestic title in 30 years. Lewis Hamilton says winning the Formula One title would mean more than ever, given his commitment to the Black Lives Matter movement. Speaking in Austria ahead of the season-opening race this weekend, the 6-time champion has been critical of others for not speaking out. Hamilton, who remains the only black driver in Formula One, has renewed calls to address the lack of diversity in the sport.
It has to continue. We have to stay on it. Black people don't have the privilege of being able to take a moment out. It's something we have to stay on top of.
The revised Formula One season has been suspended since March due to the coronavirus pandemic. Coming up, the weather and once a place of worship for Christians and Muslims, how a court is now deciding on the future of the Hagia Sophia.
For 107 years, the Tour has proven to be the biggest bike race of them all.
Listen to that crowd. He's the king!
This is a sporting event like no other.
Talk about drama.
And now we wind back the clock.
The rocket has been launched. Flex chains off. Fabio Kieran has done it again.
And relive the moments that have shaped this beautiful race.
Etap Classic continues tonight on SBS and On Demand.
At HCF, Australia's largest not-for-profit health fund, we know the importance of care when it counts. That's why eligible members can now access a wider range of treatment options in the comfort of your own home. HCF, that's uncommon care.
Help soothe digestive discomfort with Nutrilife Gut Relief from Chemist Warehouse, Australia's #1 digestive health product for 2020. Nutrilife Gut Relief Powder 180 grams is $25.99. Live, look, feel well at Chemist Warehouse.
Getting back on the road is something we're all looking forward to. And at Toyota, we're here to help you do just that.
Get 3.9% finance across the Corolla hatch and sedan range. Oh, what a feeling. Toyota.
It was next level.
It only got stranger.
Give in to fresh. Give in to Subway.
At Rest, we're always working to protect your super. We keep our fees low so more of your money stays where it belongs, in your super. It's part of our commitment to you.
Harvey Norman, the home of king-size TVs. Bigger is better. Immerse yourself in the incredible viewing experience of a king-size TV. We have all the leading brands in stock. Whether it's game day, movie night, or a binge weekend, enjoy spectacular clarity and detail with resolutions up to 8K and screen sizes up to a massive 100 inches. Connect more, see more, and do more with a king-size TV, featuring the very latest in smart technology. Bigger is better. See the specialists in king-size TVs at Harvey Norman now.
For 1 hour, you'll forget all about COVID-19. On a very special insight,
How are you going?
strangers who became neighbours.
I probably wasn't that friendly.
If Kathy shakes her head anymore, I think she might sprain something.
And developed everlasting bonds.
Sorry.
It's okay. Inside, Tuesday 8:30 on SBS and on demand. And just wait until you meet Malcolm.
I give them a few free vegetables and we have a bit of a yak.
There's a world of stories available for free at SBS On Demand. Download the app or visit the website today. SBS On Demand. A world of difference.
Let's check your weekend weather now. A front is bringing cold, gusty winds, showers and hail to southern parts of South Australia, Tasmania and Victoria, with some snowfall to the New South Wales highlands. A trough is triggering showers and storms in southeastern Queensland. A high is keeping WA generally dry. In the major centres, a shower or two for Adelaide, Melbourne and Hobart, possibly early rain for Canberra, clearing showers in Sydney, partly cloudy in Perth, sunshine for Brisbane and Darwin. Looking further afield now, partly cloudy in Auckland and Wellington, showers for Samoa, all clear in Nadi. In Southeast Asia, thunderstorms for Bangkok, drizzle for Denpasar, cloudy in Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur. Further north, cloudy in Beijing, a few showers expected for Hanoi and Manila, drizzle in Taipei. Heading west, hot in Baghdad, drizzle in Delhi, partly cloudy in Tehran, showers in Islamabad and Mumbai. On to Europe now, fine in Athens and Madrid, partly cloudy in Paris and Rome, showers for London and Stockholm. In Africa, showers in Addis Ababa and Nairobi, drizzle in Lagos, or clear in Cairo and Casablanca. In South America, partly cloudy in Asunción and Buenos Aires, showers for Bogotá and Caracas. And for North America, fine in New York City, showers for Denver and Mexico City, thunderstorms in Miami. A Turkish court has delayed a decision on whether the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul can be converted into a mosque. The 1,500-year-old heritage site has been a place of worship for multiple faith traditions, with residents having strong opinions on its future.
Once a church, later a mosque, and now a museum, Hagia Sophia has always been precious and sacred for both Christians and Muslims. Built as a church in the 6th century, the Hagia Sophia was converted into a mosque after the conquering of what was Constantinople in 1453. Then turned into a museum by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk following the foundation of the Turkish Republic in 1923. Now the Turkish government wants to alter its status from museum to mosque.
Reopening of Hagia Sophia for worship means
an obligatory demonstration of respect on our side for the will which established these endowments. At the same time, it's a token of our gratitude and loyalty to the spiritual personage of Sultan Fatih, the conqueror.
Hagia Sophia is part of the UNESCO World Heritage, which forms Istanbul's famous skyline. It's been a museum since 1935. The Armenian Church in Turkey says Hagia Sophia should be open to worship for both Christians and Muslims, and the Orthodox Christian Church is concerned at the transformation.
The conversion of Hagia Sophia into a mosque will disappoint millions of Christians around the world. And Hagia Sophia, which, due to its sacredness, is a vital center where East is embraced with the West, will fracture these two worlds.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Hagia Sophia can function like the nearby Blue Mosque, open to daily prayers and tourists at the same time.
In Turkey, a Muslim country, we are free to worship anywhere we want. No one has any say on it.
Petitions were signed by Turks to support the conversion, but there are opponents.
This is sad, a blow to our tourism. I believe it is not good for Turkey.
The conversion of Hagia Sophia to a mosque is a popular discussion in Turkey and has support from the public, along with the nationalist and conservative parties. Until last year, President Erdogan stayed out of the debate. However, he is very vocal about it now. Many believe it's a political move, especially given the rising tension between Turkey and Greece in the eastern Mediterranean. After part of the Quran about conquest was recited in Hagia Sophia last month, the Greek Foreign Ministry said it insulted the religious feelings of Christians. The Turkish government says Hagia Sophia is a domestic issue not to be interfered with.
And that is the world this Friday. If you missed some of tonight's bulletin, you can catch up on the SBS News website shortly, and you can also watch the bulletin live there or on our app. Ricardo Consalves will be back with our late bulletin on SBS at around 10:25 tonight. From the team, good night.
Interested in one thing. Can you tell a story? Can you make us laugh? Can you make us cry?
What do you got for me?
Tell me you're a man with true grit.
Does that button sink?
We'll go out to Miller's Crossing. I'm feeling a little fragile.
Cohen, friendo.
Coen Brothers Week continues with Intolerable Cruelty tonight from 7:45 on SBS World Movies.
They wanted to wipe us from the face of the earth. We kept asking ourselves, why?
I'm trying to keep us alive.
War of the Worlds starts Thursday 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
Racism in Australia is a subtle racism. It's the I'm not racist, but.
You must never feel that you are less than anybody else.
We have to let the world know what's happening here. What can we do now that could impact generations ahead of us?
Explore a collection of programs that challenge prejudice and injustice. The Black Lives Matter collection, now streaming on SBS On Demand.
Join me, Rose McManus, for Australia's first ever televised life drawing class with nude models, amateur artists and a bunch of special guests. Watch or draw